I never expected my mother to cry out of emotion. But I didn't think she'd say just 3 words when she found out I was getting married in my backyard. A backyard? No congratulations, no hesitation, just that icy voice, like reading off an electric bill. Then she scoffed, as if she'd just stumbled upon a tasteless joke. "Claire, that's not a wedding, that's a tea party for failures." And she hung up. Didn't ask the date, didn't care about the time. Didn't ask if I was happy. It had never been clearer to me that she wouldn't come. Not because of health issues, not due to scheduling conflicts, not even for a family emergency. She wouldn't come because, in her eyes, the place I chose to get married, a brick patio surrounded by ivy and paper lanterns I'd strung up over the past 3 weeks, was a stain on the reputation she'd guarded her whole life. I sat on the wooden porch step for nearly an hour, phone still in hand, not quite believing the call had ended that fast. The old wood left marks on the backs of my thighs through the thin fabric of my pajama pants. February in Oregon stabbed through sleeves like needles, but I didn't care. I kept thinking maybe she'd call back. Maybe she was testing me. Maybe she wanted to see if I'd beg. But no, just silence, dense and stale like dust in a drawer. No one's opened in years. Mark, my fiancé, came outside, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. He sat beside me, handed me the mug, and let the steam rise between us like a curtain shielding me from the blow that had just landed. I whispered, "She's not coming." He nodded. I swallowed hard. Because it's not a grand ballroom. No crystal chandeliers, no red wine beef tenderloin with a French name. No embroidered napkins. It doesn't match what she pictured when she imagined her daughter's wedding. It's not flashy enough for her to brag about to her bridge club on Sunday. Mark was quiet for a moment, then said, "She's not coming because this wedding isn't a stage for her. There's no role for her to play." I gripped the mug tighter, my heart clenched. She never asked about the handmade lights I'd spent 3 months creating, from recycled glass bottles and copper wire I soldered myself. She never asked why Mark and I kept the guest list to 30 people, or why we chose to marry where we built our life, not some sterile venue rented by the hour. She asked once, weeks ago, with a look of disdain. "You're not doing a potluck, are you?" Then laughed like it wasn't worth waiting for an answer. I never imagined she could reduce her daughter's wedding to an issue of status and camera angles. She didn't care who I was marrying, she cared what people would wear, if there were enough Instagrammable corners, and whether she'd be seated at the center table like she was at my sister's wedding. I still sent her an invitation, embossed, on artisan paper, tied with a slate gray ribbon. Not an email, not a Google form. But there was no reply. When she received it, she sent just one text. "Looks like a homeschool project." I nearly laughed. The irony? She was the one who homeschooled me for 3 years because she believed public school would ruin my mind. I sat there, February chill seeping into my chest, wondering, when the woman who gave birth to you makes it clear your life isn't worth the price of an Uber ride, what do you do? I didn't throw the mug, didn't scream. I took a deep breath, sipped my cocoa, stood up, and finished stringing the last set of lights. I'd lost count of how many times my mother said that to me, "Claire, don't bother anyone." Every time we had guests over, I was told to go upstairs and lock my door. Anytime there was a family event, I was assigned to prep food, clean up, and stay out of sight. Caroline, my older sister, was different. Since childhood she had been the center of every party, every photo, every compliment. My mother used to say, Caroline was born to shine. Me? I was the well-behaved one. Which meant silent. Which meant never asking for anything. I used to think I was just overly sensitive. Until the day I should have been wearing a beautiful dress too. It was Caroline's wedding. I was 24, had just finished my master's in interior design, still struggling to land a paid internship in Denver. Caroline was marrying a well-known attorney from an old money family. The wedding was held at a 5-star hotel in Santa Barbara with a budget over $80,000. A number my mother repeated like it was her own personal achievement. I wasn't part of the bridal party. Not because we weren't close, we were sisters, but because my mom said, "The dress color will make Claire look washed out, it'll throw off the photo." I nodded. Didn't argue. Instead, I was put in charge of backstage logistics. My mother said I was organized, good at handling the little things that matter. Meaning, I stood behind the scenes with a clipboard and headset, running around with the catering staff to make sure dessert came out on time and the playlist changed when it should. I remember exactly what I wore. A sleeveless black dress I grabbed last minute at Target, and a pair of faux leather flats on clearance for $18. My feet were swollen by the end of cocktail hour from all the running. While Caroline was having photos taken with her bridesmaids by the pool, I was behind a hedge, adjusting the officiant's microphone. One of those photos, Caroline being lifted like a princess, was later published in a local bridal magazine. My mother had it framed and hung in the living room. I had one photo from the entire wedding, a blurry side shot of me wiping down the buffet table after someone spilled red wine on the white linen. Someone tagged me on Facebook and wrote, "This server was so professional." I laughed. Didn't bother correcting them. That night, just after I'd washed the last wine glass, Caroline came over, gave me a quick hug and whispered, "Thank you for keeping everything smooth today. You're a lifesaver." I smiled. Didn't ask why my name wasn't in the invitation. Didn't ask why I wasn't seated at the family table. Didn't ask why, when the MC thanked everyone on the event staff, no one mentioned me. I got back to the hotel room just before midnight. Feet blistered. My mom knocked on the door, but didn't come in. She said from the hallway, "Claire, you did well today, you really have a knack for behind the scenes." I didn't answer. Just took off my shoes, ran cold water in the tiny tub, and soaked my feet, like I was washing off years of quiet ache. The next morning, at breakfast in the main hall, I was seated with the logistics team. My mother said, "It's just easier. You're familiar with them anyway." I left early, called a cab to the airport, didn't say goodbye. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry. I just realized one thing very clearly. In this family, I was the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. As long as I stayed out of the frame. After that wedding, I didn't attend any more family events, whether I was invited or not. And maybe that's why, when I said I'd be planning my own wedding differently, intimate, warm, and close enough not to need defined roles, my mother felt threatened. Not because I broke the mold, but because I dared to have a stage of my own. And this time, I didn't invite anyone to direct it. Mark and I started planning our wedding 3 months before the date. No wedding planner, no color-coded budget spreadsheet. Just an old notebook and a hand-sketched map of the backyard. Once a patch of knee-high weeds ruled by squirrels, like they owned the land. We called it our string lights and toast plan. Nothing fancy. No elaborate rituals. Just soft amber light lining the pathway, and long wooden tables where people could sit side by side and talk like old friends. Even if they'd only just met. I bought hundreds of string bulbs from a retiring carpenter's shop. Mark built cedar posts from reclaimed wood, secured each hook to tree branches with steel wire, measuring distances like he was building a bridge, not setting up a wedding. One rainy day, I stood shielding him with a tarp while we both got soaked, laughing when the lights flickered on, as if someone tested them from above. Mark used to be an electrical engineer. Now he teaches high school. He once told me, "The strongest bridge is the one people remember walking across." And I got it. We weren't designing a wedding to impress. We were building something to remember. I cut strips from old linen to make table runners, dyed them myself with tea, onion skins, turmeric. Each piece came out in a different hue, none of them identical. I loved that. I didn't need perfection. I needed something real. Clara, my best friend from college, handled the flowers. But not traditional wedding blooms. She came from an organic farm with bunches of wild grass, lavender, thyme, and mint. She arranged them by hand into reused glass jars, lining the tables like threads of summer memories. There were no bridesmaids. I didn't want anyone lined up, matching, smiling on cue. I just wanted my friends to be themselves. Wear whatever made them feel comfortable. St. Davidson remained open at the hotel. I didn't hire a DJ. I made a Spotify playlist and hooked it up to Mark's scratched-up Bluetooth speaker, which still played jazz like a soft heartbeat for a quiet afternoon. The menu was what I cared about most, not fine dining. I wanted food that tasted like memory. I baked flaxseed bread. Mark grilled ribs using his dad's recipe. Clara brought salad with plum vinegar she'd aged the year before. Mark's friend Leon parked his little food truck in the corner and made flatbread with goat cheese and fig jam. No dish cost more than $10 per plate. But the aroma drifted through the air, something so good it made people close their eyes on the first bite. I wrote my vows on a crumpled piece of paper folded into quarters, tucked into the pocket of my dress. That's right, my wedding dress had pockets. Clara made it for me. Soft, cream linen. No lace. No train. When I stepped into the living room wearing it, Mark froze for a second. Then said, "You look like the real Claire, not Claire for photos, Claire I wake up next to every morning." I tucked an orange blossom behind my ear, no eyeliner, no red lipstick. I wanted to recognize myself in the photos, not see a high-end Photoshop version. We arranged 32 mismatched wooden chairs along the stone walkway, each tied with a random ribbon. Like relationships that don't have to match but still belong together. The ceremony started at 4:18 p.m. Not some astrologically blessed hour, just the moment when sunlight streamed perfectly through the western trees, casting a curtain of gold across the tables. No officiant, no script. We stood facing each other and spoke like no one else was there. I don't remember every word Mark said, but I remember how he stammered halfway through, smiled, looked down, then looked back at me like he was fighting tears. When we kissed, the clapping came out messy, unsynchronized but full like a burst of confetti. Clara leaned in behind me and whispered, "Everything here is breathing." And she was right. The trees, the string lights, the glass jars. Every single person there felt like they were witnessing something unpolished, irreplaceable. I stood there, hand in hand with Mark, meeting the eyes of each close friend, listening to the familiar laughter echo around that wooden table. I didn't hire a videographer. In fact, the original plan was not to record anything at all. I wanted to keep the wedding as a private memory. Simple, real, without cameras, without staging. But then, Jessie, Mark's childhood friend, flew in from Vermont. Jessie was a visual artist known for short films featured in small East Coast galleries. 3 days before the wedding, she sat next to me on the porch, ginger tea in hand, sunlight spilling through the eaves, and said softly, "Claire, if you'll let me, I want to film everything. Not like those cliché wedding videos. I'll film the way you and Mark lived, naturally, breathing, and full of light." I hesitated, then nodded. Jessie didn't use a drone. No giant camera rig. Just a handheld camera, a clip-on mic, and an incredibly sharp eye. She weaved through what most would call trivial moments. Me tucking hair behind my ear. Mark fixing a loose string light. The neighbor's dog trotting past the table, only to be bribed with a piece of cheese by a giggling child. No staging, no one posed. After the wedding, Jessie said she'd edit a short film. I didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, she sent the link. 90 seconds long, no dialogue, just soft piano, barely louder than a whisper. It opened with Mark wiping his palms on his pants, standing at the head of the path, eyes locked forward. Then, cut to me tying a ribbon around a jar of wildflowers, smiling alone under a tree. Then to us dancing beneath the lights, shoes kicked aside, bare feet on cool stone, paper lanterns floating like miniature planets. I watched it once, then again. By the third time, I cried. Not out of regret, but because for the first time I saw myself. Not heavily made up, not tucked into the role of the one behind the scenes, but real, loved. Mark walked in as the video ended. He watched silently beside me. When the final frame faded, he whispered, "Do you see it? It looks like a fairy tale memory that didn't need any magic." That night, I posted the video on my profile. No hashtags, no long caption, just October 14th. Our beginning. Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, I got a text from Jessie. "Claire, you need to check Facebook." I was surprised. I figured a few friends might see it, maybe some coworkers would politely hit like. But no, 10,000 views in under 12 hours. By that evening, over 35,000. Strangers left heartfelt comments, sharing how they too had been shamed by family for having a simple wedding. How they'd been mocked for choosing authenticity over spectacle. A journalist from Everyday Weddings messaged, "Claire, your video is circulating in the contemporary art world. We'd love to feature you in our segment, The New Generation Unscripted Ceremonies." Before I could respond, a message arrived from Haven and Hearth, an interior design magazine. They wanted to use a still from the video for the cover of their minimalist love issue. Jessie had captured it. Mark and I smiling, foreheads touching, golden lights behind us like falling stars, my cream dress billowing gently. I panicked. I had spent a lifetime avoiding cameras. Now, everyone was staring at a private moment I once believed would stay locked on a nameless hard drive. Mark held me as I hesitated, unsure if I should reply to any of the emails. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "But if someone out there feels they need to stage a picture-perfect wedding just to be accepted, this video is proof they don't. And that's why you should share it." I sat down, opened my laptop, and responded to each message honestly. No embellishment, no performance. 2 days later my mother texted me. Not a check-in, not congratulations. Just one line. "Though this is the wedding you didn't invite me to." I stared at the message for a long time. Didn't rush to reply. In my mind, I pictured the empty chair at the far end of the table, where I had placed a single jar of flowers. Not for anyone else, but to mark the seat of someone who had been invited, but never cared to come. I wasn't angry. I didn't even feel hurt anymore. Just tired. The kind of tired you feel after folding the last shirt in a perfectly organized drawer. Only to have someone walk in, kick it all apart, and ask, "Why wasn't I invited from the start?" 2 days after my mother's message, my phone rang. Caroline's name lit up on the screen. I hesitated, then picked up. "Claire, oh my God, you're famous." I said nothing. "I saw your wedding video on Coastal Lights Insta. They posted a short clip, over 2 million views already. My friends shared it too. They couldn't believe it was you." That last part landed like a small jab. Subtle. Sharp. I took a breath and answered flatly. "Thanks for watching. Actually, I wanted to ask, why didn't you give us a heads up? Mom's a little upset. Everyone's seen the video, and now they're asking why none of us were there. You get it, right? It kinda looks like we didn't care." I laughed. Quietly, not out of amusement but because the irony was too loud to ignore. "Caroline, I sent the invitations. Mom never responded. And you never called me after I got engaged." Silence. Then she murmured, "I just thought you wanted to do something different." Didn't expect it to be that beautiful." That line stopped me, not because it was a compliment, but because of how she said it. As if what I did only gained value once the world approved of it. The next message came from Aunt Margot. A screenshot of the clip playing on a local TV segment called Local Inspirations. Underneath it she wrote, "If I'd known it would be this lovely, I would have bought a plane ticket." I didn't reply. That evening, another message from my mother arrived. "Claire, you've made the whole family look bad. Everyone keeps asking me about it. They think I didn't care. You need to clear this up." I stared at the screen. Every word landed like a velvet-wrapped blade. You need to clear this up. As if I was the one who had caused trouble. As if having a sincere wedding that didn't meet their family standards was a scandal needing PR cleanup. Mark was reading on the sofa. I handed him the phone. He read the message and raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to reply?" I shook my head. I think. They don't remember why they didn't come. They just remember they weren't in the spotlight. That night, I wrote a sentence to myself. Clear, simple, like a note pinned to my conscience. Their absence wasn't because they didn't know, it was because they didn't want to know. 3 days later Jessie called. "Claire, you might want to brace yourself. Tomorrow night, your video's being screened at Blumhouse Gallery in Portland for their Private Spaces exhibit. Reporters from a few big outlets will be there too." I nearly collapsed onto the couch. Mark looked at me, grinning. "Time for a good dress, huh?" I nodded. And deep inside, I already knew. If my mom, Caroline, or anyone else in the family saw me stepping onto that platform, lit softly by the glow of my wedding video, they wouldn't think, "My daughter looks happy." They'd think, "Why didn't anyone mention me?" The next afternoon the last message came through. "And Claire, whatever the case, I didn't expect a backyard wedding to become art. You should have told me. I would have come if I knew it mattered that much." I sat down and replied. For the first time in weeks. I typed slowly, each word like placing a stone on a path I'd already chosen not to return from. "I invited you. You never asked how much it meant to me. You only asked why I didn't do it your way. So this isn't about whether you came. It's about the fact that you chose not to care from the beginning." I hit send. There was no reply. But this time, I didn't feel empty. I felt light. Because after all those years of trying to please, I'd finally said what needed to be said. Not to blame, just to remind myself, I no longer live to be seen in someone else's gaze. 3 weeks after the exhibition, when my name appeared in a small art and living column in Oregon Life magazine, my mother called. No heads up, no small talk, just a sudden call on a Tuesday afternoon while I was watering the young lavender rose in our garden. I let it ring until the third buzz before answering. "I want to see the full video," she said. Her voice was low and raspy, not commanding, not asking for permission, but I could hear the tension tucked beneath her thin calm like a crease in an old sheet. I didn't answer right away. The wind rustled the oak branches overhead, carrying the damp scent of morning rain. I looked over at the porch, where Mark was reading, then said quietly, "Friday, 3 p.m., Jessie's studio. If you really want to see it." She arrived 10 minutes late, hair pinned up high, a cashmere coat, cream-colored heels. She didn't look around, didn't shake Jessie's hand, just nodded at me and sat down, crossing her legs. The room dimmed as Jessie hit play. No soundtrack, no narration. Just the sound of footsteps on stone. Leaves rustling in the breeze. Mark's soft laugh as I approached. Everything felt so real, it was almost hard to breathe. I didn't look at her for the entire 22 minutes and 37 seconds. But I heard her breathe sharply when Jessie showed me fixing a light strand, one side of my dress smeared with mud. I heard the chair shift slightly when Mark read his vows, and his voice cracked. I heard her swallow hard when the screen froze on us, dancing barefoot beneath golden lights, the sky a deep violet after sunset. Eyes glowing. When the screen went black, silence filled the room. I stood, walked toward the projector table, not looking back. Her voice came from behind me, low, uncertain. It looked more expensive than I expected. I turned. Her eyes met mine, no longer hiding anything. Only fatigue, and a quiet thread of regret. And I didn't think it would feel so real. I leaned on the table, arms crossed. You didn't think, because you never wanted to know. She paused, took a sharp breath, then said, more defensive this time. You made me and Caroline look bad. Everyone's asking why no one from the family was there. They think I don't care about you. I lifted my chin. The breeze through the studio door felt colder than usual. Well, they're not wrong. She stood abruptly. Her coat slipped off one shoulder, but she didn't fix it. I didn't abandon you. I just didn't think you actually wanted me there. I laughed. Not bitter, not angry, just a dry sound, like rock brushing against rock. Emma said, you never asked, you just judged. From the moment I said I was planning a small wedding, you assumed I was rebelling. Because you did everything differently. No. I did it my way. That doesn't mean it was wrong. She fell silent. Her eyes reddened, but she didn't cry. I stepped closer. You said you didn't know it would be this beautiful. That's the problem, Mom. You didn't care enough to find out. To you, value lies in lighting, food, the guest list. You never once asked me how I felt. The silence returned. Thick. Unmoving. Jessie had stepped out. It was just the two of us. And the black screen, still reflecting us like shadows on opposite sides of a mirror. She whispered, do you hate me? I looked her in the eye. I tried so hard for you to see me. But I think you only ever saw what you wanted. No, I don't hate you. But I'm done waiting. She turned, slowly. Paused at the door. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't answer right away. When she'd nearly stepped out, I spoke just loud enough for her to hear. I don't need you to fix anything. I just needed you to admit you weren't there when I needed you. She didn't turn back. But I saw her shoulders shake slightly. The door clicked shut behind her. No slam, just a soft sound. As if she was relearning how to walk away without breaking things. I stayed in the room for a while after that, not waiting for her return. Just standing there, watching the frozen image on screen. Our small backyard, glowing light. My cream dress caught mid-twirl. The place where I married the man I love. Not to be seen, but to live. Honestly. After the screening, my mother never sent another message. Not out of anger. Not because I had said something too harsh. She simply chose silence. The familiar, deliberate kind. The way someone slides a letter into a drawer and locks it. Not because it's wrong, but because they don't want to read it again. I used to think that conversation would mark the beginning of something new, that maybe, in a fairer world, she'd call one evening and start with, I've been thinking. But that day never came, and I stopped waiting. That Thanksgiving, Mark and I roasted chicken instead of turkey. No invites, no social media posts, no celebration. Just a small table, the two of us, a bottle of red wine from the supermarket 4 blocks away, and the same string lights still hanging since the wedding. Mark added a few sprigs of rosemary into an old jar, the aroma drifting softly through the kitchen. No one from home called. Caroline didn't text either. Part of me was grateful for that. No arguments, no accusations, just quiet space between people who once called each other family. In January, I received an envelope. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Slanted, meticulous, like it came from a Catholic school classroom. Inside was a black and white photo. A wedding shot from Caroline's ceremony that I'd never seen before. She was stepping up the grand stairs in her gown, while I stood far in the background, holding a tray of champagne, my face half obscured by a floral arch. I didn't remember anyone taking that picture. But now, it was in my hands. On the back was one sentence. I didn't see you then, I see you now. No signature, no further words. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I simply tucked the photo into the back of our wedding album. Right behind the shot of Mark and me, grinning barefoot under string lights, dirt on our legs, leaves in our hair. That photo belonged to the past. And the past doesn't need to be erased, only placed where it belongs. Behind, remembered, but no longer leading the way. In April, Caroline sent an invitation to a family gathering. I looked at the card without any distinct emotion. Not joy, not sadness. Just the kind of emptiness you feel standing in a party you know you're no longer part of. Mark placed a hand on my shoulder as I considered it. You can go, if you want. I smiled faintly. I don't think I need to prove anything anymore. Instead, we booked a trip to Mendocino, a small coastal town I used to dream about back in college, when family pressure made it feel like I'd never escape the undertow of expectations. We rented a wooden cabin on a cliffside. Mornings were for coffee. Afternoons, for reading on the porch. Evenings filled with waves crashing against rocks, like the heartbeat of something older than memory. I'd brought a blank notebook, not for memoirs, but to write the part of my life no longer weighed down by other people's voices. One early morning, while Mark was still asleep, I wrote, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is where you're seen, without having to fight for it." I closed the notebook and looked up. The sky outside the window was glowing, a shade of blue like shattered glass stitched back together. I knew that someday, my mother might call again. Or she might not. But either way, I wouldn't erase a single part of my life for it. The distance wouldn't be repaired. But I no longer needed to patch it with one-sided effort. I'd leave it there, as a broken bridge that doesn't need fixing, only remembering where it once reached. 1 year after the wedding, Mark and I moved into a small house on the edge of Hood River, Oregon. Nothing fancy. No pre-strung garden lights, no designer landscaping. But it had just enough yard for a vegetable patch, a sun-filled kitchen, and a workspace where I hung my favorite wedding photo. Me laughing, hands dusted with bread flour, and Mark eyeing Jesse's camera like he was plotting something mischievous. We lived slowly. Not because we wanted to join the minimalist trend, but because, finally, I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I started taking on small design projects, local cafes, community libraries, the occasional home, places that didn't need to look impressive, just wanted to feel warm, storied, and real. Jesse sent me the full version of the wedding film, tucked in a small blue hard drive. I saved it and named the file First Breath. Not because it marked the beginning of our marriage, but because it was the first time I felt truly alive. Unclenched from the weight of being seen through someone else's lens. Every now and then, I'd still get invitations from Caroline or short greetings from distant relatives who'd stumbled upon my name in a local design magazine. I didn't avoid them, but I didn't expect much either. I replied politely, just enough, like touching a book I once loved but no longer needed to reread. My mother never called again, and I didn't reach out either. Between us was a silence that no longer stung. Just a distance that no longer needed to be filled. One late autumn afternoon, while sorting through a memory box, I found a handwritten letter I'd once intended to send her but never did. The paper was yellowing, the slanted script a little uneven, full of words I'd carried for years. That I used to feel invisible. That all I'd ever wanted was for her to ask me once, "Are you okay?" Instead of, "What will people think?" I didn't burn the letter, I didn't mail it. I placed it back in the wooden box, tucked between our wedding invitations, a swatch of my dress fabric, and a sprig of dried rosemary Clara gave me that day. Mark walked in, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa, and asked, "It's getting cold, want to light the porch?" I nodded. He climbed the ladder, carefully hooking each bulb around the eaves. Even though he'd strung them 100 times, he moved with the same care as the first. The warm glow blinked on, twinkling against the darkening sky. I stood beneath the awning, cupping the ceramic mug, eyes resting on the soft lights, like little memories held together by copper wire and quiet resolve. "Claire," Mark said as he stepped down, "if someone asks you someday, what will you say about our wedding?" I smiled. "I'll say it was the day I stopped asking for permission to exist in my own life. I no longer wear those wounds like medals. I don't need the past to rewrite itself for the present to feel true. I just needed to know I had moved forward, without waiting to be invited." That wedding wasn't just an event. It was a soft but certain declaration that I was worthy of showing up fully, even if no one clapped from behind. And the most miraculous part was, I did it for myself. Not out of defiance, but because at some point you realize, autonomy isn't about shouting. It's about quietly living in your truth, even when no one's watching. I leaned my head on Mark's shoulder and thought, if there's a kind of happiness called peace, it probably lives right here. In this moment between old string lights and the wind slipping through trees out front. Claire's story is proof that self-worth doesn't come from anyone's approval. Not even from family. When we dare to live honestly and break free from imposed expectations, we don't just reclaim control, we find deep peace. In real life, not everyone gets an apology, but everyone has the right to stop asking for permission. Sometimes, happiness begins the moment we stop waiting for recognition and start living as we are. What do you think of Claire's journey and her choices? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.